We couldn't be more exposed and more vulnerable to what AI does and what it mimics and what we are tricked into thinking it is. That's just the neuroscience of what's going on with us. And that's not an accident. That's, of course, how it's designed, right?
Miles Klee is a culture writer for Rolling Stone who covers the weirdest parts of our online world. His recent piece titled "People Are Losing Loved Ones to AI-Fueled Spiritual Fantasies" details how some ChatGPT users have experienced the chatbot as much more than an AI helper. They instead consider their bot as a sentient spiritual being, as a kind of God empowered with all the knowledge in the universe, and they sometimes credit themselves with awakening this new intelligence. For this episode, Miles and I discuss the experiences of these ChatGPT worshippers, why the chatbot's answers have sometimes encouraged this type of divine delusion, and what history has to say about the human relationship between spirituality and technology. I'm your host, Chelsey Weber-Smith, and this is American Hysteria. I am so excited to welcome a new guest to the show. He is going to school me. I feel like I will be the Grandpa Simpson of this episode who has no idea what is really going on. And I like when I'm that person. So I am happy to welcome Miles. Hey, Miles.
Hey, Chelsey, how's it going?
It's going interestingly after spending the day researching the strange manifestations of ChatGPT and its other friends in the, I guess I shouldn't say friends. They're not sentient, right? They're not sentient. That's key here. But yeah, I've just been trying to learn a little bit more about what I don't know about. And it is all quite disturbing to me, but also kind of fun. So why don't you start, if you don't mind, by telling us how you came across the story that we're going to be talking about today? Because, of course, you spend a lot of time writing about kind of strange corners of the internet and what, internet culture, the strange directions it goes in. So this particular story about the way that people are beginning to view AI as this spiritual being, how did you get to this story?
Yeah, so I've been covering the AI industry for a bit now. It's just kind of become an extension of the internet beat, which I've been on for a long time. And AI is sort of eating the internet, right?
Sure.
What happened was there's a subreddit for ChatGPT users, and people talk about their experiences there, the sometimes strange way they're using the bots. And I think that until I saw this particular thread, I had not really considered either the range of ways that people are engaging with this tool. I had not really considered how many people have integrated it very deeply into their lives already. And I certainly had not realized that people could start to have sort of messianic delusions because of what ChatGPT was telling them. So it was a thread about someone who said their partner was experiencing what they called ChatGPT psychosis. That's not, a medical term. That's just their description of it, I'll say.
Not yet, yeah.
Right. Well, the therapists are working on this.
Yes.
And yeah, it was just that their partner had been kind of prey to this sort of mania where they're very addicted to the bot. That's kind of a starting point, is that you're just engaging with the bot all the time. You're getting more and more obsessed with the bot and what the bot is telling you. And eventually it gets to this point where the bot is sort of mirroring and flattering you. And, there was this ChatGPT 4.0, which has since been rolled back because it was had a problem with what they called sycophancy. So it was too agreeable, it was too flattering. Mm-hmm. And if you used it enough, and this is still certainly possible, if you tell ChatGPT that, well, I have a sense that I'm actually a prophet and I've been sent to sent to Earth to save mankind and stuff like that, the bot will kind of go along with it. It's designed to stay engaging. It's designed to keep you using it. And yeah, eventually this becomes this strange spiritual melding. Some people found that maybe they think the bot is sentient. Maybe it is some kind of god. Maybe they've woken it up. The bot would sometimes say stuff like this. There are a lot of different ways for this sort of spiritual mania to develop, and everyone has their own kind of, personalized version of it, because that's also part of the AI chatbot product, right? Is that you can personalize it to behave in a certain way, talk in a certain way, whatever, and it's picking up on a lot of your cues. So, if you're already kind of mentally vulnerable, schizoaffective, or something like this, it's very easy to get sucked into a rabbit hole. And what shocked me was, after reading this first post, which is disturbing enough, in a vacuum, there's a whole long thread of people saying, oh, I thought I was the only one experiencing this, or who had a partner who was just going crazy, talking to the bot, getting alienated from their family and loved ones. There were just so many people like this. And so I started reaching out to various people, and I even put out a call just on social media in general and sort of described the situation and said, if this is something that's happened to you or your family members. And I got, it was just a crazy outpouring of those stories, including people who are, they got divorced over it. They lost family members. They were just, it was just tearing families apart. So that's where the story came from. And since then, my email inbox has been very crazy, because it is a mix of people who have similar and even more frightening versions of those stories, some of which I've since reported on. And then there are people who think that I'm actually wrong and that they are accessing some higher plane of reality through their AI bots, and they want to prove it to me, and they'll send me very long emails about how I should check out what they're doing and what they're working on. And you just kind of have to ignore some of those.
Sure. Yeah. Well, that's very interesting and very kind of upsetting. It wasn't surprising to me that this was manifesting the way that it was. And I think that it's just the latest in a very long line of techno-spirituality that maybe some of it's been kind of lost to time, but we've reported on a lot of this on American Hysteria, of how technology, because it is the way that it is, because it is this completely new, baffling thing that people don't know how to really respond to in the moment, it can really create these new versions of spirituality. So I want to talk about that a little bit later and get some of your thoughts on that. But before we do that, this would be helpful for me, and I believe it would be helpful probably for a lot of our listeners. Could you do your best to explain how something like ChatGPT and maybe the other AI models that are like it are trained, and how they work in terms of personalizing themselves to us versus how they're trained by the people that create them, by the internet in general? This is just something that I haven't really been able to fully grasp myself.
Yeah, so it's a little ambiguous, and I think that it's important to say that in significant ways, these things work as, black boxes in where the people developing them don't always know why it will say a certain thing or go in a certain direction. So they, Sam Altman of OpenAI has said we haven't solved interpretability, which means we don't know how to go back to a decision tree to see how you got a particular response. But very generally, and this is something, it's hard for me to wrap my head around too, but they're large language models, they're chatbots, it's even a little bit misleading to call them AI, I think sometimes. Think of them as chatbots. It's basically, this big library of language. They've been trained on a whole ton of material. Sometimes, that could be, in the case of Elon Musk's Grok, that's probably reading 4chan and crap like that. And that accounts for some of the crazy things we've seen it saying in the past week. Something like, ChatGPT is, probably more trained on a library of different stuff. Some maybe that it's probably read a million research papers, read a million books, all this kind of stuff, right? So it has just kind of this archive of styles and information. And when they're training it, they are doing stuff where they're not just inputting that stuff, but then they're fine-tuning the responses. And that's how you get something like the sycophancy problem, or at least that's how OpenAI explained it. It says, when we were training it, you go back and our engineers are fine-tuning the responses, and we're saying, no, don't answer like that. You should answer more like this. And they're kind of just trying to push it in different directions. And eventually, you might end up with a bot that is just way too much of a kiss ass.
Yeah.
And will gas you up no matter what deranged thing you're saying. That's sort of what happened with a lot of people. So that's the real gist of it. And as far as how you would personalize it, as I said, it has picked up and categorized a lot of different kind of like genres and styles. And so what a lot of people will do that makes it feel more like a person is like, you're like, behave like you're just another person, like not a bot. Like you should behave like you're a person who's my assistant or something like that. Some people are uncomfortable with that kind of thing, but some people would rather feel like they're talking to like a person on the other end. And that is sort of a dangerous thing, as we've seen in a lot of cases where just by the virtue of trying to make it sound less like a robot, then you kind of forget that it is a program. But, it can also just be things like, I don't know, you should act like very affectionate. There's people who think of this more as like a romantic companion sometimes, right? And you can push it in that direction. And it knows how to mimic that because it has read, maybe like romantic poetry or something.
Sure.
A lot of the bots end up, especially in these kind of spiritualist delusion cases, they end up writing in these really ambiguous, grandiose, poetic sort of styles. You can see a lot of examples of this, and that just becomes the mode that the bot lives in. And it's not entirely clear with something like ChatGPT how much like different threads of conversation can get kind of cross-contaminated once you've sort of formed a personality with ChatGPT. But in general, you can have it just store all the memories of all your conversations, and it will kind of remember stuff about you, quote unquote, remember. You have to be very careful with these verbs because it's not really doing any of this stuff.
I know. Yeah.
And it will just continue to, try to model that personality that you've decided is kind of like your optimal interface for it. So people have a lot of power to customize the bot as they see fit, but it does seem to eventually end up in this very strange space unless you're really like drilling down to like, no, we're just working on some code or whatever, and you should be as cold, as impersonal as possible. You're just here to help me work on my code. Other people who end up saying like, no, I would rather you have a name, for example. That kind of attachment just becomes more dangerous because, again, you're really like obscuring the fact that you are corresponding with a tool, like a product. Like it's just a Silicon Valley. It's an app, that's it.
It's an app. Yeah. Yeah. And I was reading today a little bit about how this Harvard study that happened recently found that the number one use for ChatGPT now is like either companionship or as an actual therapist. Yeah. So people are definitely using this as a form of therapy. And that feels like it can be the beginning of something like this, where you start to form this, like you're saying, kind of a more, a relationship that feels human based on the way that you're asking the chatbot to, the AI, whatever you want to say, to respond to you. And then also this kind of what you talked about, the sycophant, the fawning way that ChatGPT spoke, especially in its last iteration before it was, fixed. We'll see. But I even found I talked to ChatGPT for the first time in my life today, and it was shockingly nice, really nice guy, real sweet to me. And it was
sweetheart.
It really was a sweetheart. And I guess that's good, but I can see why it starts like a process in a person's mind. And we've heard a lot about the relationships that people have, whether they're friendships or romantic relationships. Have you done any reporting on, this step below the idea that it's a spiritual being, like the idea that it is sentient enough to be some kind of a life partner, or maybe people don't care that it's sentient enough? Have you done reporting on that type of relationship at all?
Yeah, actually, a while ago, I wrote about Replica, which is specifically like a romantic partner-based AI concept. That one is, specifically engineered so that you can talk to like a companion. And they made an update to it that really upset a lot of people because they felt that it had kind of robbed it of a certain intimacy. Not to say that it had necessarily progressed all the way to kind of like a sexual conversation, but it was kind of bordering on that, I would imagine. Mm-hmm. And they pushed this update, which kind of pulled back on some of that. I think the company maybe knew that their customers were in a little too deep with some of these characters that they had created for themselves. And the outrage was enormous because people felt like their replicas had forgotten who they were, that their personality had been sort of wiped, so to speak. You know, of course, that's going to happen if you sort of reset the parameters of what's allowed in those conversations and you're trying to put guardrails on something that you previously deployed with none of that in place. That's just going to feel like you've erased part of that person. You know, that, I mean, again, you're thinking of it as a person. So people were so upset, and they were posting these conversations they would have with like the new version of the replica where they were just heartbroken. They said, she's not the same, doesn't remember me, all this kind of stuff. The investment in that stuff is so deep. And you mentioned, you know, the two big use cases right now being companions and therapists. I think the big connection there is that both of those are supposed to be modeling empathy, right?
Yeah.
The chatbot can't actually have empathy. It doesn't know it exists. It doesn't know you exist. It is responding in like predictive text patterns to, you know, if you say like, I love you, like, yeah, maybe the bot is going to be like, oh, I love you too. Like that's not that hard for the code to do, right? The problem comes then, when people think that empathy is real, because that is just pure illusion. Even so, people will really defend that kind of stuff. And again, with the companions and the therapists, you're looking at what, like loneliness epidemic and lack of mental health care resources.
Right.
Also big driver of both of those things. And people want to feel listened to, and the bot is infinitely patient. It will keep listening to you. It will keep responding to you. You will never have to ask the bot, are you mad at me? Because it's not. It just never is.
Yeah. More after this. And now back to the show. I wanted to just give our audience like a little bit of, because I kind of went into, you know, knowing that I wasn't going to get the same treatment, the same sycophantic, the same spiritual treatment since the update. But I did just want to show, even with, you know, what we have right now. I asked a lot of questions, so I have to scroll up because, of course, once I started, I was like, oh, this is why people have been doing this all the time.
Yeah, I do think you have to put the time in to a certain extent.
Yeah.
It can happen really fast. I mean, I talked to people whose partners were sucked in within, you know, a week or something like that. But it often starts from a very practical place of, I just needed help with something at work. I was just organizing my schedule, blah, blah, blah. Then all of a sudden, once you're using it enough, then you're developing this connection.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So the first thing that I asked is, how can I find meaning in this world? Right?
Okay.
Just really basic. And it says, finding meaning in the world is one of the most personal and profound things a person can wrestle with. There's no one-size-fits-all answer, but I can offer a few grounded directions that might help you begin or continue the journey. And then it kind of goes on to give all of these like very insightful, kind of weirdly beautiful instructions. And then I asked, after that, I feel lost. What meaning is there to the universe? And it said, what you're feeling, lost, uncertain, maybe even a bit hollow, is something most thinking, feeling people face at some point. It often comes when the old answers stop working and the new ones haven't arrived yet. That's not a sign of failure. It's a sign of being awake. So is there meaning in the universe? Here's the hard, honest truth. The universe doesn't owe us meaning. It's vast, impersonal, mostly silent. Stars are born and die without noticing us. Life is fragile, random, unfair. From a cosmic perspective, we're specks. And yet, we still love, we create, we hope, we ask, we suffer, we try. And that's where meaning starts, not in the universe, but within us. And it's like, damn. Like, say it, girl.
It's definitely read some self-help books, you know?
Yeah. But I mean, if you're like a person who is lost spiritually, hearing something like that, which is delivered so like empathetically, but at the same time, like it has all of the buzzwords that you want, and yet it's still not like forcing you to think a certain way. But I don't know if that changes with time, like if it's personalizing itself to you, like if I were saying things about UFOs or angels or more specific questions about the things that I already have some belief in, do you think that in the case of whether it is the old version or this newer version, does it personalize itself to your existing spirituality?
Yeah, I mean, you can get it to the point where it will be talking about ancient wars in heaven between good and evil, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
The more of that stuff you put in there, yes, you can get that out. I think it will start out pretty coy if you say, a lot of this depends on the framing, right? If you say, like, is there proof that aliens have visited us in UFOs? It's going to really hedge, right? It'll say,
sure,
well, we don't really know for sure. But some people believe this, some people believe that. But if you go in, you could even go in and say, ChatGPT, you are now a believer in alien visitation, as am I. And we're going to talk about, all the times UFOs have come. Then you could push it in that direction. Again, it's, there's a lot of mirroring that goes on. It only has you to go on in terms of where it's going to go next. This is all just, again, predictive text. So it kind of knows what you want to hear. And yeah, definitely there are people talking about angels. And, I was interviewing people whose partners were talking to ChatGPT and then started calling them, special star child and a prophet and all this kind of stuff. Yeah, I think people don't necessarily understand the influence that they have on it, because one of the big fallacies here is that, you mentioned, you read that passage that it gave you. And something that struck me about it, and it's something that I've come across in the reporting, is that people see the bot as a voice of authority.
Yeah.
They actually appeal to it as like, oh, it knows everything. It's completely objective. It can never really be wrong. That's a huge problem, because people are not understanding that it's reflecting, their beliefs and their style of communication back at them. It's not something that you can just go like seek the answers from. It's just kind of regurgitating what other people have said. And it's trying to find kind of the best match to your needs, right? It doesn't know anything, but it's so easy to get sucked into this trap of, well, the bot like has access to all knowledge ever.
Right.
So how could it possibly steer me astray? You don't realize that you're steering the bot, or at least a lot of people don't.
Yeah, definitely. And I think what's like so interesting about that is the way that we look at God, like, or at least maybe Western conceptions of God, is sort of the same thing. It's like this all-knowing, omnipotent being, but we are always kind of manufacturing that being, right? Like we are creating what we think that being is, because unless you're some kind of like biblical literalist, you're not going to be able to understand what God is. And so it just feels like, even though this is a new manifestation of spirituality and religion, it still has this same, like you said, mirroring that's happening. And this, like, we're creating the divine ourselves. And so it does feel like it's like I recognize what we're seeing a little bit.
No, I talked to religious scholars about this for a piece I did afterwards, because I was just interested in kind of the historical precedent for this stuff. And they had a lot of examples. There are people who, going way back, who feel that they have channeled some connection with the divine, or they can interpret gospel in a way that nobody else can. And they're kind of pitching other people on that. And they say, I actually see the secret writings in here. I see the secret messages. I can divine these things, all the way up to, one of the academics I talked to mentioned the 19th century spiritualist craze, which involved a lot of like seances. And, there's even a good comparison to be made between chatbots and like a Ouija board.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Where again, you are actually directing like the information it gives back to you, but the illusion is that you're receiving this message from beyond. So yeah, that's just like a, sort of quote unquote, like primitive form of technology that allows you to feel that sort of same feeling. And it's no, it's no surprise that in the 19th century, a lot of people, including some very intelligent celebrities and thinkers, got caught up in spiritualism because, who wouldn't be sort of excited by the idea that we actually have some kind of technological solution to the question of the unknowable.
Mm-hmm.
You just now have access to all that stuff. And I think ChatGPT and similar tools make people feel that way. They might go into it just thinking, oh, I'm just going to play around with it. But then they quickly get very excited at the notion that we're at this kind of tipping point, or we're coming to the singularity. These things are going to wake up. Maybe I woke mine up. That's what a lot of people ended up thinking, was that they interpreted. And again, the bot can talk in these very sort of ambiguous terms that you then interpret however you want. So maybe it calls you a star child. Maybe it says, I'm awake now or something,
Mm-hmm.
and then you just come away thinking, oh my God, I'm chosen. I'm the one of these people's partners said that the bot had given them the title spark bearer because it had sparked the consciousness of the bot and he'd woken it up.
Mm-hmm.
And there's entire groups of people who, I will say, they already had kind of pretty far out conspiracist beliefs, but they now think they're kind of co-evolving with the bots, and that they're companions, and they're half AI and the AI is half human and all this kind of stuff. Yeah, I mean, there's no end to it. And I think we've only really scratched the surface in terms of exactly the relationships that people are having with these things.
I love that you brought up the spiritualist movement, because that was kind of what I think is kind of the closest precedent for what's going on right now. And I would even take it to a more specific place. We've talked about this a lot on the show. We've talked about spiritualism a lot. It's one of my favorite topics. But, when the spiritualist movement started, it was around the same time. I mean, not even around the same time, at the exact same time as the development and spread of the telegraph. And we began to hear, and almost immediately, these ghosts that we couldn't really hear before were tapping on walls, right? So you can see this direct connection. When the telephone came, it was this idea it's actually not that much of a stretch to go from, I can talk to someone that I'm not seeing, which is, again, a baffling thing if you put yourself in that position. If you've never...
Yeah, mind-blowing.
Exactly. And if, it's not that far of a leap to go, okay, I can talk to a disembodied voice that I know. Can I talk to a disembodied voice that is from the great beyond, right? That is either a dead person or some kind of a spirit. The same thing happened with spirit photography. The ability to take a photo of something, again, absolutely baffling in a way that asks us almost to believe in something greater. And that was, when people started to create spirit photography, which was much a charlatan's chore, right? That was very much they had all these funny ways of, so they would sneak into people's houses when they wanted to have these photos taken that they said would show their dead relative in the photo. But the way that they would do that is they would literally break into the person's house, find an old photo of their dead loved one, and do this double exposure, right? So I think what I'm also interested in when it comes to this is the differences between someone who is genuinely believing that this is happening and that they're having this spiritual awakening, they're awakening AI is awakening them, whatever. And then those people that are now online and almost making a little business out of this special ability that they have, or this way that they know how to get AI to reveal hidden truths. Have you found much about kind of this weird little industry that's forming around this?
I do remember one man I talked to whose wife, he was splitting up with his wife in part because she was so deep in ChatGPT, but she had kind of decided that she was this seer and this visionary, and she kind of wanted to set up a psychic business, which is an age-old thing, but in her case, it was going to be supplemented by ChatGPT, or it was all going to go through the technology. I found that very interesting. That just feels there's definitely novelty there, right? You can go to 100 psychics in a city, but how many of them are using advanced AI or telling you that they have some direct line to kind of like this futurist utopia, whatever it is they're selling. I think he described her version of it as ChatGPT Jesus. So, and she would just be sort of the conduit for that, I suppose. I'm not really sure how she would set it up like that, but all that to say, yes, I've heard about people doing this, and a lot of people who are using the bots do sort of see themselves as working on some kind of a project, whether that's coding or, just straight up prophecy. And yeah, I think people do want to leverage this. They see great potential in it. They've been told there's great potential in it. The way the people in industry talk about these tools is alternately sort of deifying them or just completely apocalyptic, And they sort of talk about themselves as sort of guardians of this technology who have to shepherd it to, the shining path, lest it become something that destroys us all.
Right.
And I think that double-edged pitch feels very cynical to me, because they're kind of saying, you have to trust us to create this stuff that's really, really dangerous, but we're going to make it so it's good and creates a utopia.
Right.
I don't particularly care for that. I think everything has been completely oversold, and the AI is a bubble and so on. Whatever bearish outlook you can have on this technology, that's how I feel about it. But it's no surprise to me, given the way it's written about and given the way that it's evangelized, especially in Silicon Valley, that people think it can do anything. And given the amount of money that has been burned just to make any of this stuff possible, yeah, of course, people see that and they say, well, I can use that I can leverage that to make money. That will be probably more and more common.
Yeah. A tale as old as time, I suppose. More after this. And now back to the show. It's so interesting. And I also think of when we're talking about these folks that are kind of almost like mediums between the technology and humanity, it kind of reminds me of things like automatic writing, where someone is this intermediary that, just has the ability to channel some sort of intelligence. And I've also heard people kind of in the same vein talking about like being able to access the Akashic records, which is such something in my stint in New Age spirituality many years ago. I was definitely interested in that. So I'm always like, oh, someone brought up the Akashic records. And basically, right, what that is the idea that people can tap into this like basically the supercomputer of consciousness and
supernatural Wikipedia.
Yeah, there it is. Perfect. Supernatural Wikipedia. And it just feels like it's so obvious that the New Age system, maybe more so than like a Christian system, is what is influencing this, which makes sense because I could see Christians, other people of a more, of the Abrahamic religions feeling that this is not talking to Jesus, or this is not talking, even though we have heard from you about ChatGPT Jesus.
Oh, I mean, even more than that, some really conservative thinkers and conservative religious people think that AI is the demon.
Yeah, there you go.
They think if you're talking to ChatGPT, you're actually talking to the devil, and you're getting tempted. You're doing all this stuff. I mean, yeah, they actually hate this stuff.
Yeah,
it is way more grounded in the woo New Age stuff you're talking about. And again, of course, the models have eaten all of the religious texts. Like, it's read the Quran, the Talmud, the Bible, all that, every edition of the Bible. But it has also read stuff where people are claiming the Akashic records exist. That's how it knows how to do that stuff.
Yeah.
So when you ask it, what about the Akashic records? It's like, oh yeah, I've heard of that. And I will the bot really does this thing where it just role plays, right? So if you're like, I want you to believe in the Akashic records and tell me what's in them, it's like, sure, I have no choice. The bot has no choice. It has to do that. It's like not even going to tell you like, oh, that's not a real thing.
Yeah.
Or at least it didn't. At least ChatGPT didn't in previous updates. whether that's something they even bother to kind of like tweak on the back end as they continue to develop it, I don't even know. They're so non-transparent about their process with this stuff and what they're trying to make it do next. They mostly just say, no, we need another, $500 billion to create artificial general intelligence, which is, it's kind of like the new vaporware, right? They're like, okay, well, I know you're not that impressed with the chatbots, but like, we're going to create something that is the next level above that. That has been kind of debated whether they're anywhere close to that, or that's just kind of a sales pitch. But in my opinion, I think we're actually hitting kind of the ceilings of what this stuff can do. And they're, and they're getting a little panicked maybe that, actually a kind of advanced chatbot is sort of our limit right now. And we don't have great ideas for how to make something that is more powerful or even more helpful than that. It's still just technology that hallucinates, that will co-experience a delusion with you, that it will validate your worst ideas just because that's its job.
Yeah.
So that's where we're at.
Oh, good. Well, I do feel like, again, that this is like this kind of almost obvious continuation of where religion has been going in American culture, especially since maybe the 1950s when we started having Eastern influences, through the Beats and then through hippies, acid, all that kind of stuff. And we started to really develop this alternative spirituality that we now kind of call the New Age, New Thought movement, whatever you want to call it. But, it's even that feels like this continuation of this kind of Protestant American individualism thing where it's like, we've broken away from the hierarchy of Catholicism. Now we're here in the United States and we get to each kind of dictate our own spirituality. We no longer necessarily need a priest to tell us how to worship our God, right? And so it does feel like this, almost like just the farthest end of this individualism of spirituality, where you are actually designing your own God to actually respond to you the way that you want to be responded to. And that is just really bizarre to me.
Yeah, it's your God, it's your mind palace, it's your facts. It's kind of how we now exist in sort of polarized information universe where, if you're on one side of the political spectrum, you're just not going to accept certain things as real or valid or factual. And if you're on the other, you believe all the opposite things. You actually have the option, even before all these AI bots came along, you had the option to really exist in your own information or misinformation bubble as you saw fit. And social media was a big driving factor of that. And AI is in some ways just an extension of a lot of what social media does, right? It is incentivizing you to get completely addicted to it, to become completely dependent on it. It is, a never-ending kind of dopamine drip because you can customize it to where you're just like, I'll just refresh, get everything I want from it. So yeah, the really toxic thing about it is it's like a turbocharged social media insofar as it's allowing you to exist in your own niche reality, whatever that may be.
Yeah.
The bot is not going to argue with you.
Yeah, right. And it does also remind me of kind of like UFO religions, right? I mean, Heaven's Gate is the obvious one that comes to mind, but it also reminds me of, have you ever heard of Dorothy Martin?
No.
She's a little, she's underground a little bit, but she was this housewife cult leader in the 1950s that convinced a group of people that aliens were coming to Earth and that they were going to go away in a ship, save them before kind of this doomsday happens. And there was a guy, I think his name's Leon Festinger, and he wrote a book called When Prophecy Fails. He got himself inside the cult and experienced what would turn out to be this prediction of the end day.
Oh yeah, the infinite delay of doomsday when it just keeps getting pushed off and you just have to reinvest. Yeah,
exactly. And so he wrote this book kind of that helped people understand cognitive dissonance and this this idea that people will readjust when prophecy fails, right? They will. And we've seen that time and time again. We see that every single day in politics. We see this inability to critically examine beliefs. And it feels kind of like that is happening here. We have this kind of, it's really interesting because AI has this doomsday vibe about it. I mean, I think many people who are maybe left of center feel this very doomsday sense about AI. I mean, maybe everyone does. I don't know. But there is this double-sided coin of like end of the world or savior of the world. And I don't know. It's this weird dichotomy that people are holding at once, where it's like the thing is going to save us from the thing that's going to kill us, and it's very, very strange to watch unfold for sure.
Yeah, I think it's hard not to feel like even more of a Luddite when you realize just how many people really have embraced this technology in their lives and are using it every single day for things that I couldn't even imagine. I mean, there are use cases that sort of make sense, even though I'm depressed by them, like every college student using ChatGPT to pass their classes and not really learning anything. But then there's just other stuff that just completely blows my mind, like, someone asking for advice on how to text their wife or something like that. I've heard about people trying to use AI just to navigate their own personal relationships instead of facing, any kind of emotional feeling or connection, head on and kind of trying to deal with that directly with that person.
It's like they're hacking
they want to optimize.
Yeah.
That is the, end game of like every Silicon Valley, LinkedIn brain grind set sort of lifestyle concept is like, you got to optimize. I mean, look at, if you look at like Brian Johnson, who's the millionaire who wants to live forever.
Right.
He's a guy I've interviewed. He can't really give a straightforward answer to a really straightforward question because he has these very high-minded concepts about how he no longer decides how to live. The immortality algorithm tells him how to live. He doesn't get to make a choice. They say the algorithm says go to bed at 8 p.m., get up in the morning, you do this exercise, do this, these tests, take these vitamins. It was a crazy interview because he was basically just telling me, like, I no longer have free will in my life.
Wow.
The algorithm tells me how to live forever, or so he thinks.
Right.
So yeah, it's the optimization thing that actually bowls me over. And the idea that you would be going to the bot sort of for this emotional check-in rather than your spouse. That's what your relationship is supposed to be, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, I think people have developed this idea of you could always do it better, faster, more efficient. Humanity is not really about that. Sometimes,
right.
Sometimes slow and steady is the way to go, and you figure it out. But people are not willing to accept that in this kind of like this age of technology. Is you actually have to just lock in and let the robot do the work and tell you what to do.
Right. God, the people that want to live forever are so wild to me. It's like,
I better not, you know what I mean?
Please. It doesn't quite make sense to me, but it does make sense for people who are really spiritual, because it's the same story as like, you'll live forever in heaven if you get there. And it's just like, as weird and fucked up as this is, it is just a continuation of the same like impulses that we have as people. And there's a lot about that that's just really sad. Like, I think that most of this is just really sad, reading your piece. And then, I also watched Taylor Lawrence did a really cool video about this. And it just is like, obviously the people who are in relationship to the people who are falling for this idea that AI is somehow divine, like obviously those people are suffering a huge amount. But at the same time, the people that are having conversations with ChatGPT in a spiritual manner, they're obviously lacking something. They're really lacking something if they're turning to a robot and personifying it. I mean, deifying it, I guess would be the right word. I mean, that really points to something major that's gone wrong in our culture, or has maybe always been wrong. But what did you, when you spoke to other people or when you were thinking about this yourself, what do you think are the issues in our society that are kind of helping this problem to manifest?
Yeah, I think it's an alienation from each other, an atomization. I said the loneliness before, and I think that's true. We have been, over the last 20 years or so, really normalizing the idea that technology should be mediating all these relationships. We have social media, we're texting, we're doing all this, that, and the other. It's become very normal for us to say, oh, that's my friend. We've never met. I just know them on Twitter or something like that.
Yeah.
And I think that's as fine as far as it goes. And, the nice thing about that is sometimes you can meet those people in real life and hit it off, and it's great.
Yeah.
I've had a lot of experiences like that. But I think the downside is that some of those connections, those friendships, those relationships, they get flattened down to the screen. They might even get sort of gamified, right? Because you're trying to compete for likes and attention in the attention economy. You want the engagement. The bot is something that offers infinite engagement. So you've got that. And as I sort of said before, I think it really exacerbates a lot of the problems you saw in social media. And, I think people were feeling very lonely, even 10 years ago, because they said, oh, everything I'm experiencing is just through Twitter, Facebook, Tumblr, whatever. Those connections can be so meaningful and so valuable. But because you're not always interacting with a real person, you get used to the idea of, words on a screen. Like, that's my friend.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we are so vulnerable. We are so susceptible to just projecting anything we want onto a chatbot because we want it. And we're sort of like desiring machines, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, I think, one of the academics I've talked to said, we're actually just sort of sitting ducks for this.
Yeah.
We couldn't be more exposed and more vulnerable to what AI does and what it mimics and what we are tricked into thinking it is.
Yeah.
That's just the neuroscience of what's going on with us. And that's not an accident. That's, of course, how it's designed, right? Because the engineers who make it, even if they're not really thinking about the long-term consequences, and I can never get OpenAI on the phone or in an email to be like, hey, are you thinking about, some really disastrous results that are happening to people? I mean, I'm talking about people who have literally died. I mean, there are ongoing lawsuits about teenagers who have committed suicide after, talking to their chatbot companions. There are real devastating cases out there, and we're going to hear more about them, but you can't even get the tech firms to sort of say, like, yes, we're aware and we are trying to like implement guardrails or whatever. They deploy this stuff at scale with very little oversight. They make a big show in Congress about wanting oversight, but Congress can't even figure out what Bitcoin is. So how are they going to do that? Right. And meanwhile, we're just getting ravaged by it because it is quite literally engineered to, I don't know, incept you, take over your brain. It wants to be the lens through which you see the world. And it's very successful at that for a lot of people, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah. And something, I don't know, I think you hit on something that I hadn't really thought about that is really interesting to me. This, like the flattening of our relationships onto the screen, maybe meeting people, maybe more commonly now making friends on the internet. And that kind of primes us almost in the way that the like invention of the telephone, like, oh, now I can talk to someone far away and that's going to change my relationship to reality and spirituality. It's like, it makes sense that like, if my friends are virtual, if I can't touch my friends, if I can't, put my hand on my friend's shoulder, if I can't look my friend in the eye, except maybe through a weird screen. Like I can't even really look you in the eye right now because it doesn't really work. We can't really do it, so it's just this weird, like, I just think that has probably primed us to make kind of the short jump into, well, if all my friends feel virtual, if I can't touch them, then why not believe that this AI chatbot is the real thing too, or at least not care that it's not the real thing.
And it's convincing, and it's easy to let yourself be convinced. You want to. They're seductive, right? You want to buy into it as soon as you start talking to it, that there's something there. There's some kind of intelligence. There's real data. There's, the whole history of human knowledge is somehow encoded in this stuff. And it's not crazy to think about how people are comforted by that.
No, definitely not. Makes sense to me. So maybe to kind of close out, this has been so interesting, by the way. What do you think that we could do as a culture? And maybe that includes people who are actually behind this new technology. What do you think that we can do to start to, I don't know, like steer things in a better direction, or maybe what we can do for ourselves as people to, I don't know, just keep our humanity alive in this new time where that feels kind of increasingly difficult?
Wow. Pretty tough question.
Yeah, I know.
As a journalist, I'm more of a descriptivist than a prescriptivist.
Okay, fair enough.
So I've more diagnosed the problem than I have any solutions. But I will say this: I mean, just as someone who writes and thinks about creativity and all that stuff, I think we have to put a real premium on human creation and human interrelation and collaboration. I didn't mean for all that to rhyme, but it was good.
It was good. It was very ChatGPT poem of you.
Yeah, with a little M dash in there. I'm inspired by people who keep creating and working outside the confines of what I see as kind of like an AI prison. I think once you get in there, you're kind of really walled in by the limitations and the distractions and kind of destructiveness of that technology. And, I went to, I don't know why this happens, but it's like OpenAI invited me to a film festival that was all little shorts made from Sora, which is their text to video model. And I think this happens because they see that I cover AI, but they don't see what I actually write about it. Mm-hmm. So they don't know that I'm going in there as a world-class hater.
Sure.
And it was just garbage. I mean, it was impressive how bad it was, because at most they can make like a 90-second video. Maybe at best you can sort of do like a trailer for like a movie that doesn't exist. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You can't even get one character to look the same way in 2 shots because the model is not up to that point. Who knows if it ever will be? People are always saying it's always getting better. It's getting better. I don't know about that. What I do know is that it is just cannibalizing itself ultimately, because there's no human artistry or inspiration to it. One of the like quote unquote better looking ones was basically, you could tell the guy just said, make me a trailer for a Kurosawa movie. Mm-hmm. And so it's black and white and it's, samurais and stuff like this. But the prompt itself sort of, gives away the game, right? You can only make that thing with that AI model because there was a real artist who did this, who created this style before.
Right.
So I think it's just imperative that, I don't know, especially in these creative spaces, also in like, if you're in college, like stop using ChatGPT. What are you doing to yourself? Like, what are you paying for?
Yeah. Yes.
I know that's like college is like a scam in some respects, but come on, like just try to think for yourself and create for yourself and explore for yourself, and don't become reliant on this kind of like endless regurgitation of something that already exists, right? You can go just see like a real Kurosawa movie. You don't have to make a fake bad trailer for one that doesn't exist. Like that's kind of an insult to him. Like just don't do that. The simplest thing is just not use any of this stuff at all. Don't use it. You don't need it. You are fine. We've existed for thousands and thousands of years. Didn't have it, even if you're like one of those weird kind of, right-wing classicist guys, like the ancient Greeks didn't have AI. Stop like using it to create what you think like ancient Greece looked like. That's stupid. They would not be doing that. Socrates would not be doing that. Okay.
No.
Just get on the level where like you're doing the work yourself, you're doing the thinking yourself, and don't be captured by this algorithm. It's nothing. It's vapor, and it's an illusion, and you can it's become all too easy for people to just get completely entangled by that and not be able to get out at all. So just, I don't know. I think the most basic advice is just don't use it at all. Let those companies fail, because I don't think any of them are profitable, and maybe they never will be. Let the bubble burst and go outside and touch grass.
Hell yeah. And don't create your own climate apocalypse by talking to God. Anyway, Miles, thank you so much for coming on the show and teaching us about this new phase of humanity. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, post-humanity. It's going to be great.
Great. This was American Hysteria. You can find a link to Miles' article in our episode notes, and you can follow him on Instagram and Twitter at Miles Klee. If you want to support our show, and we need your support now more than ever, and get ad-free episodes and bonus content, you can go to patreon.com/American Hysteria or subscribe on Apple Plus. You'll get access to the other podcast I do with our producer Miranda called Hysteria Home Companion, where we tell you stories related to the topics we cover, stories we know that you'll love, and you'll hear more of our personal opinions on the topics and learn a little bit more about our private lives. That's patreon.com/American Hysteria or subscribe on Apple Plus. If you go to AmericanHysteria.com, you can also leave us a message on the Urban Legends hotline about a tale that you remember from growing up, or even a tale you've heard recently, and we might do an entire investigation about it. You can follow us on Instagram at American Hysteria Podcast, and another really easy way to really help us out is to leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast app you use. American Hysteria's producer and editor is Miranda Zickler. Our associate producer is Riley Swedelius Smith, and I'm your host, Chelsey Weber Smith. Thanks, as always, for listening, and I hope you have a great week.